Hello and welcome to the Capital Games Movie Club. I am the Wiz. Zero's out for some reason trying to make an illegal casino in Texas. I told him it's legal in other states. He could do it elsewhere, but he's dead set on Texas. So, good luck. I don't know what else to say. Good luck on that, Zero. Okay, so this week for Noir November, I decided the movie that we should watch this week is Gilda, starring Rita Hayworth, Glenn Ford, and George Macready, directed by Charles Vidor, and written by E.A. Ellington and Joe Eisinger, with a screenplay by Marion Parisinet. Before we get into that, I think we should talk about we've talked about last week what I feel about noir films. I think this week would probably be a good thing to talk about, especially in this with this movie. I think female performances in noirs, and the sad thing with most of the noirs I've seen is there's only so many things you can do with female performances and writing females in noirs. They're either the deceitful dames, the femme fatales, or the poor women that they have to be rescued. And usually that's the flavors they go through, or they're the love interest. And that's sadly what it is with most female performances, I would say, within the 30s to about the 60s or 70s. At least with popular films. There are exceptions. But when it comes to noir, they're really typecasted. And to an extent, Gilda is the same way, but there are key differences with Gilda that makes it more interesting than other noirs when it comes to a female character in this noir film. So let's get right down to my thoughts on Gilda. Gilda is a story about a small-time gambler who is hired by a proprietor of a Buenos Aires casino to run his casino. After he runs the casino, his boss leaves to go somewhere, comes back, and is married to a woman that was his former lover. And that former lover is Gilda, who is played by Rita Hayworth. The small-time gambler, the one who's running the casino, is Johnny, played by Glenn Ford. And his boss is Balin Mundinson, played by George Macready. And the whole movie is basically how these three characters coexist throughout the entire film. And what's really striking about this movie is the dialogue. It reminded me of Casablanca, only much meaner. Much meaner in this one. Like, I would say everyone in this movie, to a certain extent, is to a certain extent. I would say everyone in this movie is Humphrey Bogart's character in Casablanca, acid-tongued, quick with insults, and basically very sharp-witted, pretty intelligent, and has some really good dialogue throughout the entire film. And these are the type of films that I really gravitate towards. Films with really interesting characters, really sharp, very intelligent dialogue, and just a dynamic that isn't shown a lot, and dynamics that aren't shown a lot in, I would say, more mainstream films to a certain extent. But Gilda is a little different, because Gilda was a mainstream film back in the 40s, but it had this really quick-witted dialogue that I really liked gravitating towards, especially with Rita Hayworth's character, Gilda. Gilda is written, I think, is pretty much the most dynamic character in the movie, to a fault at times, but she is the most interesting character. She is a title character, of course, but she is probably the most interesting in this. You don't know what she's going to do, to a certain extent. You don't know if she is just an immoral person, or if she is just a free spirit, or you don't really know her character at all that much until towards the end, I would say. And even then, you question her motives to a certain extent, which I actually really liked while watching this movie. Because the problem with not even just noirs, but with movies that have female characters that are meant to be unlikable is that even though they are made to be unlikable, they're supposed to be unlikable, you still want to like the character. It's a weird dichotomy, because even if someone's evil or someone is duplicitous or can't be trusted or is someone that you personally would not ever want to deal with, you still to a certain extent want to watch this character go through the paces throughout the film. And I definitely felt like I wanted to in this. Because in most movies, when it's like an unlikable, detestable female character, the go-to is just to make her a bitch. Just to make her so unlikable and so annoying that you wish they would not come back after a certain point. And that's not Gilda in this. Gilda, as much as she is, I would say, duplicitous and a person who, if you had to deal with, you wouldn't want to trust in any sort. You want to know what she does next. And it was definitely refreshing to see that in this movie, to have a character that, like I said, deep down, if you had to deal with, you would hate dealing with. But you strangely want to know more and want to see more of. And that's great for two reasons. One, the writing, because she is the best written character in this movie, and she is an interesting character with the way she's written dialogue-wise, and that's also with Rita Hayworth's performance. In most movies nowadays, with this type of character, the go-to is just to make her sexy, just to make her beautiful, just to make her desirable in a physical way, and then you can understand that, oh, okay, these guys want a banger. That's why they all want her. That's pretty much it. And yes, Rita Hayworth is very beautiful in this movie, very good looking, but she also gives the character a lot of charisma and, to a certain extent, likability, but it's mainly her charisma as Gilda that really sets this movie up to succeed very well. I mean very well, because this film, to a certain extent, does, I would say, kind of fall apart. But even so, watching the film, the two male characters contend with this woman is in itself very entertaining because of how Rita Hayworth plays the performance and how she is written throughout the movie. It is so well done. And if this character did not work, this movie would have not worked despite having good male performances. But Rita Hayworth does a really good job in this, and I could see why people praise this performance, because it is such a likable, likable. You know what? Yes, I think Rita Hayworth is actually likable, even though she is kind of a detestable person. She's not really someone that if I had to deal with in real life that I would want to. I personally would be annoyed to shit by her. But even I can admit, she's charming. She is someone, as the movie goes on, you want to see more of, even though she's really taking the people around her for a ride. Like, she's clearly using everybody around her to a certain extent. So that is the sign of a great performance and great writing, is that you know this person's bad. You know this person is not someone you want to be around, but you still want to watch her. You still want to see what happens, and you want to see what happens to her, which is a testament to how great the writing of this character is. The male performances and the characters are good. Glenn Ford is good as Johnny, and George Macready is good as Balin Munson. But they're one-note characters. The interesting thing about this movie is how it's the opposite of most romance movies to a certain extent, where the men usually are the men who are the most defined, who are the characters who go through the change or or are more, I would say, are deeper in a certain extent, whereas the female characters are usually the ones that stay exactly the same to a certain extent with most romance films. This is the exact opposite. Gilda and Rita Hayworth's character is probably the more dynamic character in this movie, whereas Johnny and Balin stay the same throughout. They are just reacting to Gilda in this. And it is a subversion with how most romance films are, but this isn't necessarily a romance film. It veers into that to a certain extent, which I'll get into in spoilers, but it really is meant to be a character study on, I feel this is meant to be a character study on how toxic people essentially live with each other and have to work around each other in order to, in my opinion, in order to basically get what they want through their toxicity. Gilda likes to manipulate men to get her way. Balin likes to use crime and intimidation to get his way. Johnny likes to be sneaky and likes to be duplicitous to a certain extent to get his way. And again, the only person that really changes in this is Gilda, and I'll get into that in spoilers. And I kind of wished they did more with the men in this, just to make it a more fully fleshed out movie. But even so, I'm going to knock it for it, but I think it still is a very good movie despite that. The direction, when it comes to shot placement and the way the movie looks, is fine. It's fine. I can't recall scenes in the movie that I look at and go, wow, that's a good piece of filmmaking. That looks great. It's standard for its time. It looks fine. It kind of reminds me, it does remind me a lot of Casablanca in certain ways, but I think Casablanca is actually a much better directed film looks-wise. But I think the timing and the way that the dialogue flows and the way the characters interact is where its strength lies. I think the way that the movie lets the actors play with each other is where the strength of the direction is. Which also means essentially that the writing is, I think, the key star in this movie. The dialogue in this movie is really good. Really good. And watching these characters shoot barbs at each other is the most entertaining thing about this. The quick-witted insults, the put-downs. It is a really, to a certain extent, it's a fun movie to watch. Because I was laughing at certain scenes of dialogue where maybe I shouldn't be. And it's just because that the dialogue in the movie is just written so well that I just ended up really enjoying these characters interacting. The dialogue in this is just really good. Is it as good as Casablanca? No, but there is a difference. Okay, that's not fair. I shouldn't compare it to Casablanca, really, because they are two different films where Casablanca really is a romance. I don't think Gilda really is, to a certain extent. It kind of veers that way, but okay, fine. What are some weaknesses? I think the third act of the film is kind of weak. I do. And I'll get to that in spoilers, but the third act, it seems like they were making a film of the times to a certain extent. We needed a happy ending, is how I look at it. Like, films of those days didn't have bad endings, okay? And because it is X, and it's about X character, and the main character is a female, this film has to be X for people to watch it or to enjoy it. And I get that's part of the business side, and that's what audiences wanted at the time, but it kind of sucks. I wanted it to end a different way, but did it ruin the movie? No. it didn't. It was just kind of disappointing because I thought they were going to go in a specific direction in this movie. And because they didn't, again, I was disappointed, but it not enough for me to go, oh, that ruined the movie. Not at all. Not at all. Why don't we get into spoilers for Gilda? After this point, we're going to go into spoilers. If you have not watched Gilda, you can stop the podcast, come back, and listen to it when you're ready. We're going to start with spoilers on Gilda in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The main thing I had a problem with is the third act of the film. At the end of the second half, Balin finds Johnny and Gilda. I think this is what happened. Found Johnny and Gilda kissing in her room, and then he goes off and flies away, and then his plane blows up in front of everybody, so everyone believes that he's dead. But the movie lets you know right away that he's not. He made out to look like he was dead, so you know he's coming back to a certain point. What I thought was going to happen, essentially, is that Johnny was going to run amok and essentially treat Gilda like very toxically, and that relationship was going to go to a whole other level of toxicity. Because throughout the film, Johnny adores Balin, will do anything for Balin, almost to a point where he loves Balin to a certain point. I'm not going to be one of those people who think this is a gay movie, because there is a deeper relationship between two men. That's not what I'm saying. But it's clear that Johnny has some affection to Balin to a certain extent. So he was kind of probably felt some guilt about Balin dying after watching what happened with Johnny and Gilda. That's kind of what happened, but not really. In the third act, Johnny, quote unquote, gives in to his romantic impulses and marries Gilda right away. But because he knows Gilda and knows how she is, he treats her like a prisoner. She can't go anywhere. She can't do anything. She's followed by one of Johnny's henchmen, and Johnny runs Balin's old business, so he's in charge. To a certain extent, they try to make Gilda... They try... It feels like they artificially try to make you feel sorry for Gilda, which, of course, you're going to. No one wants to be in that situation. But they try to do two things at once. The film wants you to feel like Johnny is justified in a strange way in doing what he's doing, and make you feel that Gilda doesn't really deserve this, even though she is a person that can't be trusted and is fairly duplicitous. And that's a weird dichotomy. I think if they spent more time on that, it could have worked, but the amount of time they did spend on it wasn't deep enough and didn't really work very well. And then you're supposed to believe at the end that Gilda really loves Johnny in the end. He's always loved Johnny, even though he spent most of the time insulting her, hating her, being disgusted by her. And then Johnny goes and runs away with her. That ending was weird. And the ending, of course, is Balin comes back. He comes back to murder both Johnny and Gilda. And the servant who's been insulting Johnny this entire time saves him. I mean, he does have sort of a relationship with Gilda. So maybe you can say that he tried to save Gilda in that sense. But this is a character that literally looked around and went, doesn't bother me, whatever, who the fuck cares? But then you're all of a sudden wanting to believe that he cares enough to kill another man for a bunch of people who, A, didn't care about him, and B, he supposedly did not care about. Yeah, that's a little weird. That I had a hard time with that. And that's where my feelings of, this is a film of X time, an audience expected X to happen at the end of every film, And we don't subvert the audience. We don't like to upset the audience. We don't like to show the audience something different. So we're going to give them that. And that's disappointing. It's a sign of, it is a part of the times around that time. So I'm not surprised by it, but I am disappointed. I thought about how this movie would be made today if they were to make Gilda today. And they would essentially up the sexiness in this. Like, it would be less a femme fatale and more of like a Cassandra or a sexual goddess of sorts who ensnares, like I would say, like a Black Widow, and someone who ensnares the men sexually in a way where they get into her grasps and she subverts them and puts them into her hands by sexually gratifying them, which isn't Gilda in this movie at all. So I think that would be weird. I don't think writers nowadays could write Gilda the way that she was in the 40s that they would do today. They would give Gilda a lot more agency, which wouldn't work in this movie. You have to play within the confines of that time, where it's the men who have all the agency, and this is a woman who, despite not having much agency, is going to grab it any way she can. And it's that kind of desperation, I think, that gives this character more believability and makes her much more interesting. If you were to set it today, I don't think it would come off that way. I think it would come off as someone who's being much more manipulative in a bad way. Not in a way of surviving, but in a way that she just can. And that would be very hard to make Gilda today feel like if it was remade today. It would make that character, I would say, feel more sympathetic and more likable to watch than anything. I think, honestly, if they were to make her today, she would just be a bitch. She would just be somebody that would be detestable. You wouldn't want anything to do, and you wouldn't be able to like her in any sort of way. And unless you really change things up, like almost to the point where it would just not be a movie, it would not be Gilda. Like, you couldn't set it in, I think you couldn't even set it in a casino. You would have to set it in a drug dealing cartel, essentially, is where you'd have to set it. And that brings in its own kind of weird complications as well. So this movie, I don't think, could be remade today. You can do shades of it and draw inspiration from having a character like Gilda in a movie today, but it would be really hard to do something exactly like Gilda today, I think, in this. Yeah, the men characters are not that deep. I mean, you learn right away that Johnny is not a trustworthy person. He cheats when he can, and that's just what he does. He's willing to lie, even though he makes himself out to be very loyal to Balin. Yeah, but that doesn't really change very well. I mean, he still remains loyal to Balin to the very end, I think, to a certain way. But Balin is the one character that I think needed more time. Gilda, at the end of the movie, says that Balin was insane, and he was not a good man and everything. But the way that the movie makes you feel is that he may have not been pleasant to be around, but it was because of Gilda. So I would have liked to see more scenes in that movie where you could define Balin more as someone who is more unsettled, who is, I guess, more insane, or more of a person that should be feared, without making it look, well then, see, okay, but if you do that, does that lessen the power of Gilda? Because part of Gilda's charm and what makes her an interesting character, that even though she's in a situation where she has no agency, she is still a very independent woman who you think could take care of the situation on her own if need be. would it be a good idea to put her in a situation where then she has to ask for help? Would it lessen her character? Would it lessen the power of her character? It might. So that might be... The writers might have written themselves into a situation where, in order to give more depth to Balin, it might hurt Gilda. So that could be an issue. I mean, they might have written themselves into a hole there. That's really it I can think of when it comes to spoilers. I still very much like the movie, but I could see that there is issues in this movie, and I'm not a fan of the ending, to be absolutely honest. I don't hate it, but it could have been better. It's still, I think, a very good movie, and it's because of Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth makes the movie. Okay, so let's get into the final discussion for Gilda. Gilda is a 3.5 for me, a 3.5 out of 5. If I liked the ending more, I probably would have given it a 4. But I'm comfortable with 3.5. Rita Hayworth makes this movie. She is fantastic in this. Probably one of the better performances of a female actor that I've seen in a while. Like, in a long while. And part of it is that, especially with the way the character is written, she's sexy without being overtly sexy. She's attractive and beautiful without using that to her advantage to a certain extent. She's quick-witted, smart, and intelligent, and Rita Hayworth uses those aspects to build that character up without overly relying on her sexiness and her beauty, which I think made this performance really good. I know she was a sex symbol after this movie, and I understand why. She is a beautiful woman, but I think part of what made her a sex symbol after this is not the looks, but it was basically how she performed that character and how she brought that character to life. Maybe it's just me, but there's nothing sexier than an intelligent woman. There's nothing sexier than a woman that can trade barbs and that can talk to you and lead an interesting conversation. That you can look at a woman and say, oh yeah, she's sexy, but what really is sexy is someone who's intelligent. And that is what made Gilda and Rita Hayworth's performance such a memorable, really well-written character. I do wish the rest of the other characters were written better. I really do. I would have liked a more dynamic and a more fleshed out characters surrounding Gilda. But it doesn't hurt the enjoyment of the movie. I still enjoy Gilda. I think it's a very good movie that I think a lot of people, if you give it a shot, would actually watch, especially if you bemoan that there aren't any good movies with good female characters. This is one. I would say this is definitely one. So 3.5 stars for Gilda. Highly recommend it. If it wasn't for the ending, which went to stereotypical romance territory, I would have given it a 4. But I don't know. I might watch it again some other time, and it might give it a 4. So we'll see. 3.5 stars for Gilda. I recommend this movie. Okay, so now that we're done with the review, let us get into some topics to discuss. Today, a tweet came out from Studio Ghibli, and it was an interesting tweet. It was a small, I think a few second video, and all it showed was the LucasArts logo, followed by the Studio Ghibli My Neighbor Totoro logo, and that's it. And I think LucasArts also quote tweeted that as well through their Twitter account, which basically signifies that it seems like Studio Ghibli is doing something with LucasArts, and it sounds like it's going to be Star Wars. Now, I, for one, am for Star Wars shaking things up, because I think this is a property that desperately needs to be shooken up. I think the sequel trilogy overall was disappointing. I think The Force Awakens was too much like A New Hope. The Last Jedi gave flashes of, oh, this could go in a different direction. Oh, wow, this seems interesting. And then they just said, nah, let's just do the same old bullshit. And that was disappointing. I don't think The Last Jedi is necessarily bad, but I think it's very disappointing, where they hinted that the main character could go the dark side, or could go gray, or could do something different than the others, which would have been fascinating to watch, but they didn't do that. And they flirted with doing different things, but they just didn't. And that was disappointing. And Rise of Skywalker was a mess. Holy crap, was that a mess. Rise of Skywalker is the worst of the 9. And I could not believe I can say that after watching the prequel trilogies. Oh my lord. Man, was Rise of Skywalker a mess. Oh. So I think when it comes to movies and property, and to be fair, I haven't been watching the TV series. And it's mainly because Star Wars, as a property, I've been losing more and more interest. And my interest lies in movies, to be completely honest. And if the movies aren't doing anything for me, or I kind of starting to dislike the movies, I'm not going to spend more time watching the TV shows. I've watched a couple episodes of The Mandalorian, and I thought it was fine, but I didn't get the praise that it was getting. So I kind of dipped on Mandalorian, and I keep hearing, like, Bad Batch is okay. I'm hearing Andor, I think it's Andor that's going on right now. It's actually really good. But I'm still not going to give it a shot because I'm not happy with the direction that Star Wars is going. So I'm not... I think the one Star Wars movie recently that I actually had a positive outlook on was Rogue One. That was good. It wasn't great. It was like, oh, okay, that was fine. That was my feeling of Rogue One after watching that. And the rest have been either disappointing or just straight garbage. And the reason why I'm saying this is, even though I love Studio Ghibli, they make fantastic animated movies. They make some of my favorite movies. I don't think they're going to have the artistic freedom to do something different with Star Wars. Star Wars is very much more brand focused than artistic focused. Like, they don't want people to be uncomfortable or to be subverted in a Star Wars story. They want people to be comfortable. They want people to know what's going to happen. They essentially are saying, well, this is what makes mass audiences happy. Let's just do that. Not realizing that audiences can get bored by that if you're not doing something different. And the leadership at LucasArts, I don't think realizes that right now. They've had so many problems with other directors right now trying to do Star Wars movies, and then all of a sudden there's creative differences problems, or there's cancellations. I think was it Rogue Squadron with the director of Wonder Woman. I forgot her name, and it sucks because she's a great director. But shit. But yeah, she was supposed to do Rogue Squadron, which I was really excited for, and then creative differences popped up and it was canceled. The Rian Johnson trilogy he's supposed to have, which some I know are not excited by because of The Last Jedi, but I like Rian Johnson, so I'd give him a shot. He's having issues. There were other projects that have been canceled because of creative differences, or they're realizing the brand is not doing very well, so they have to start canceling projects. Star Wars needs a refresh, and big time. And I think the best thing for them to do right now is to concentrate on stories that have nothing to do with the Jedi. I think that's my personal opinion. I think if they go away from Jedis for the time being and do a couple movies like that, and I know they did Solo and that didn't do very well, but I think if they flesh out this world that apparently has a very rich extended library of, it could do wonders for this franchise. I mean, really flesh it out to different things. But I don't see them doing that with the movies. I see them going back to Rey, or going back to a new Jedi who has Force powers, and, oh, he's the one, she's the one, it's the one too. Okay, we're going to do that again. And that's why I'm not very excited by this collab. Because Studio Ghibli, when they get to do their own stuff, is very imaginative. Or they're unafraid to do things that make people maybe not uncomfortable, but they'll make them think and make them really feel deeply about something. Like Grave of the Fireflies is a fantastic movie that they've done that I will never watch again because of how fucking depressing it is. But it is a beautiful movie to watch, and it's a really good movie to experience. But I do not see LucasArts saying, "Yeah, you have the keys. Do something different." I don't see that. I see them saying, "Yes, do an animated movie about Jedis, but in Studio Ghibli style." I am not interested in that at all. I'm not. I want something. If you're gonna have a Studio Ghibli LucasArts collab, just give the property to Studio Ghibli and let them go nuts. Hell, if you can get, I really hope Miyazaki is not in this. But even if you don't get Miyazaki, there are directors in there that are very good who can do fascinating stories that could work. So right now, when it comes to the possibility of a collab with Ghibli and LucasArts, I am so not excited about this because I think I know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to get the announcement from the people that made Spirited Away and Grave of the Fireflies. Comes a new vision of Star Wars, and people get excited. Oh my God, Studio Ghibli and Star Wars. Oh my God, this is so great. And it turns into every single other Star Wars story. Just it looks Ghibli. And that would suck. That would be terrible. I'm not going to lie, I'd probably watch it anyway because I do really like Ghibli. Even so, I don't have a lot of faith in this collab. So hopefully I'm wrong. I'm willing to admit if I'm wrong. But I don't really see this being a big thing that I think people should be really excited about. I know people are excited by it, but I would say temper your expectations because LucasArts and Disney is just not a company that allows people to do different things with their property. They have a strict Bible that they go by, and they say you cannot do anything past this Bible. Do not subvert it. Do not do anything different. Do not break it. Don't do anything. We want this movie to be this, and it has to be this. As long as you stay on this guideline, you're fine. Other than that, we'll have problems. So, yeah. I will see what it is, and I'll be interested, but I gotta be honest with you, I don't have rosy thoughts on this. So, we'll see. We'll see if it turns out to be different. And maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I am. All right, so we are at the end of the episode. Before I go, I have a question for me. I gotta come up with something better when Zero's not here. Okay. It is the 15th anniversary of No Country for Old Men, the movie that got the Coen brothers, a fantastic directing brothers, their first Oscar for Best Picture and Best Director after doing films like Fargo, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, The Man Who Wasn't There. They finally got their Oscar from No Country for Old Men. So the question that I've been seeing going around Twitter since this has been told, what are your top 5 favorite Coen Brothers movies? Coen Brothers are some of my favorite directors. I love the Coen Brothers movies. They are very interesting, and their blend of dark humor and drama is some of the best in filmmaking. Okay? That said, I think you'll be quite surprised what my top 5 is, okay? So, first off the bat, I'm going to say that No Country for Old Men and Big Lebowski are not in the top 5. I am actually not a fan of the Big Lebowski, and that's going to piss some people off, and that's going to be like, well, how can you not be a fan of the Big Lebowski? It's the dude. It peed on my rug. How can you not? Yeah, I get it. Okay, I get it. But, yeah, I'm just not... I've watched it a couple of times. And I get some parts are funny, but I still don't like it. I'll say this. I think when the Coen brothers do just straight comedy, it's not my cup of tea, really, except for like one movie that's in my top 5. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Big Lebowski. No Country for Old Men is also not in my top 5, even though it has a excellent performance by Javier Bardem. And I mean excellent. It is probably one of the best performances I've seen from a person playing a villain. It is fantastic. And I get this is the point of the movie, but I just get no feeling at all from the movie after I've watched it. I've watched it 3 times. And each time I'm like, yeah, okay. Like at first it's like it was kind of cold for me, which is the point. It's supposed to be a cold film. You're not supposed to get happy, fuzzy feelings from it. But then after a second time, I was like, okay, sure. But then third time, I was like, something just feels off about this movie, and I can't put my finger on it. Maybe I'll watch it again, and maybe I'll figure it out. But it's a movie that I think is a little too serious to a certain extent for the Coen brothers. And maybe that's my problem. Maybe because I'm thinking of it as a Coen brothers film and I have a specific thought process on what I think a good Coen brothers film is. Maybe that is what's giving me the hang up. But with that said, I would, out of 5, I would put No Country for Old Men as a 2.5. That's going to piss some people off, but that's just my feeling of it. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad film, but I don't get the enormous amount of praise that it gets from people, especially when I think there are much better Coen Brothers films there. So here are my top 5 of Coen Brothers films. Number 5 is The Man Who Wasn't There, starring Billy Bob Thornton, Frances McDormand, and James Gandolfini. Great performances in this movie with really good black and white cinematography. It looks gorgeous. It is a gorgeous looking movie. And it plays the dark comedy and drama really well in this. And I particularly like Billy Bob Thornton in this. It's a really good movie that I need to watch again at some point. And it is, yeah, it's a very enjoyable, very, not laugh out loud hilarious, but there are some funny parts in this movie that you don't expect. And I really enjoyed The Man Who Wasn't There. Number 4 is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I'd say the only pure comedy that I really like from the Coen brothers. And you've got really good performances by George Clooney, and the supporting cast in this movie is so good. Oh my God. The supporting cast is great in this. You have John Turturro, Tim Blake Nelson, Stephen Root. Oh my God, so many great performances. And even though it's set in, I think it's Louisiana or Mississippi, it feels like a different world. And it's something that I never thought I would see the Coen brothers do so well. They did it very well in Fargo, but I didn't expect it in this different type of style in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And it was just a very entertaining, very funny, and very good film. Number 3 is True Grit. I think the 3 main performances of Jeff Bridges, Matt Damon, and Haley Stanfield is really good. I think it's Haley Stanfield, right? And Haley Steinfeld is the performance of this movie. She's fantastic in this. It is a 100% excellent performance. I think, aside from Frances McDormand, I think she puts in the best performance in a Coen Brothers film. I think it's Frances McDormand, Haley Steinfeld, and Javier Bardem are the top 3 performances in Coen Brothers films. She's fantastic in this. And she could have easily, her character could have easily been annoying and hard to deal with. But she did that performance so pitch perfect and did the dialogue in that movie so damn well. It is a performance that I don't think gets enough credit from a lot of people. I think it's a fantastic performance. I think if I did a top 25 list of best female performances, Steinfeld would be in there. I think that's how good it is. That's how good it is. Number 2 is Inside Llewyn Davis. Inside Llewyn Davis is a hard movie to recommend because you're dealing with characters that are just not likable, but there's a deep philosophical meaning to the film that really resonated with me. Oscar Isaac does a very good job in this movie. The themes are really well done. It is an achingly beautiful movie about a person that generally is unlikable, that somehow you still feel for in the end, even though he gives you no reason to like him. It's number 2. It's very close to being number 1 for me, but it's number 2, and it is. And if you haven't seen Inside Llewyn Davis, it is a fantastic movie. And number 1's Fargo. Fargo is a special movie for me. I'll get a little personal here. Fargo is the movie that made me realize that I want to do something in film, that I wanted to write about film, and that I felt differently, or I thought differently about film or about different things that maybe others didn't. And it woken up something in me that I desperately needed at a time. Before I saw Fargo and before I realized what I wanted to do, I've always wanted to be a film critic, or I always wanted to write in film. I didn't realize that until I saw Fargo, and loving the film, and realizing how deep and meaningful and gorgeous the film is, and all the different things that the film does so well. Like Fargo, I think will always be my favorite film of all time, even though I can admit at times that there are better films, critically. Fargo will be an important movie for me for the rest of my life. It will be something that I'll always look back fondly on. But outside of my personal feelings, it has great performances. Frances McDormand, William H. Macy, C. Buscemi, Peter Stormare, like really good performances by really talented actors. And the writing is superb. And the direction is beautiful too. Like, I never thought I live in New Jersey and I've seen snow all my life. I never thought I could see snow shot so beautifully in a movie. And the minute I saw Fargo, I was like, wow, that looks good. But yes, Fargo is, I think, the best Coen Brothers film of all time. And I don't think anything can beat it. I think in A Moment's Weakness, if you were to really say, okay, really, what is the best Coen Brothers movie? I would say the best Coen Brothers movie is Inside Llewyn Davis. But my absolute favorite, and I think will always be a favorite person because of the personal meaning it has to me, is Fargo. Fargo will always be that movie that awoken something in me and made me realize that it sounds corny, that maybe I have some talents that I could work on, or that I am good at something, or I can do something differently. And it kind of awoken that in me. And it's a movie I'm deeply thankful for. It's strange, I know. But, yeah, Fargo will always be my favorite movie of all time. And it'll always be my favorite Coen Brothers film. And if you haven't seen Fargo, even if you don't have the deep attachment that I have to it, I would really recommend watching it. Although, if you're a Coen Brothers fan, you probably have, and you probably know what I'm talking about. So, there you go. Top 5. Number 5 is The Man Who Wasn't There. 4 is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? 3, True Grit. 2, Inside Llewyn Davis. Number 1, Fargo. All right, well, we are at the end of the podcast. But before I go, we're going to talk about what we're watching next week. So I thought about doing Thanksgiving movies. And then I realized there aren't really that many good Thanksgiving movies. I mean, there's Plane, Trains, and Automobiles. There's The Family Stone, which... Okay, let's be fair. There are some good Thanksgiving movies, but really the holiday movies that are really good that I really want to focus on are going to be Christmas movies, and that's next month. So I thought we should watch a couple of films that right now are still considered some of the best that came out this year that are available on streaming or on Blu-ray. And I was interested in seeing this movie when it came out, but since I don't go into the theaters, I didn't bother going to see it in the theater. So I think, especially with some of the Oscar buzz it's getting, I think it would be a good time to watch Elvis, starring Austin Butler and Tom Hanks, directed by Baz Luhrmann. My experience with Baz Luhrmann is mixed. I was in high school when I saw Moulin Rouge, and I adored it. At the time, I was doing reviews in my school paper, and I gave it Best Film of the Year. And now I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I still think it's good, but it's not great. I think as a visual director, he's outstanding. But as a writer, he's okay. I do like his mix of using contemporary music in like settings in the past. I think that's interesting that he does that, especially with he did in Moulin Rouge with things like Nirvana and Madonna. I thought that was very interesting and kind of worked. And I hear he does the same thing with Elvis, so that'll be interesting. So that's what we're gonna watch next week. Tune in next week where we're going to watch and review Elvis, starring Austin Butler and Tom Hanks, directed by Baz Luhrmann. And that is it for this episode of the Capital Games Movie Club. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.